Transparency and objectivity are essential in scientific research and the peer review process. When an investigator, author, editor, or reviewer has a financial or personal interest or belief that could affect his or her objectivity, or inappropriately influence his or her actions, a potential conflict of interest exists. The most obvious conflicts of interest are financial relationships, including direct conflict of interest such as employment, stock ownership, grants, patents, and etc. Indirect conflict of interest such as honoraria, consultancies to sponsoring organizations, mutual fund ownership, paid expert testimony, and etc. Undeclared financial conflicts may seriously undermine the credibility of the journal, the authors, and the science itself. An example might be an investigator who owns stock in a pharmaceutical company that is commissioning the research. Conflicts can also exist as a result of personal relationships, academic competition, and intellectual passion. An example might be a researcher who has a relative who works at the company whose product the researcher is evaluating. A self-serving stake in the research results, such as potential promotion or career advancement based on outcomes. Or personal beliefs that are in direct conflict with the topic he or she is researching. However, not all relationships represent a true conflict of interest. Some considerations that should be taken into account include whether the person's association with the organization interferes with their ability to carry out the research or paper without bias, and whether the relationship, when later revealed, make a reasonable reader feel deceived or misled. Who are susceptible to conflict of interest? All participants in the peer review and publication process, not only authors, but also peer reviewers, editors, and editorial board members of journals, must consider their conflicts of interest when fulfilling their roles in the process of article review and publication, and must disclose all relationships that could be viewed as potential conflicts of interest. Authors. When authors submit a manuscript of any type or format, they are responsible for disclosing all financial and personal relationships that might bias or be seen to bias their work. Peer reviewers. Reviewers should be asked at the time they are asked to critique a manuscript if they have conflicts of interest that could complicate their review. Reviewers must disclose to editors any conflicts of interest that could bias their opinions of the manuscript, and should recuse themselves from reviewing specific manuscripts if the potential for bias exists. Reviewers must not use knowledge of the work they're reviewing before its publication to further their own interests. And finally, editors and journal staff. Editors who make final decisions about manuscripts should recuse themselves from editorial decisions if they have conflicts of interest or relationships that pose potential conflicts related to articles under consideration. Other editorial staff members who participate in editorial decisions must provide editors with a current description of their financial interests or other conflicts and recuse themselves from any decisions in which a conflict of interest exists. Editorial staff must not use information gained through working with manuscripts for private gain. Editors should publish regular disclosure statements about potential conflicts of interests related to the commitments of journal staff. Guest editors should follow these same procedures. Full disclosure about a relationship that could constitute a conflict, even if the person doesn't believe it affects their judgment, should be reported to the institution's ethics group and to the journal editor to which a paper is submitted. All publishers require disclosure in the form of a cover letter or footnote in the manuscript. A journal may use disclosures as a basis for editorial decisions, and may publish them if they are believed to be important to readers in judging the manuscript. Likewise, the journal may decide not to publish on the basis of the declared conflict. According to the U.S. Office of Research Integrity, having a conflict of interest is not in itself unethical, and there are some that are unavoidable. Full transparency is always the best course of action, and, if in doubt, disclose. In September 2016, a new report suggests that the sugar industry-sponsored research has turned attention away from the sweeteners linked to heart disease and toward fat and cholesterol as the bigger culprits. The study reviewed archival documents from the 1950s and 1960s and found that a report published by Harvard nutrition professors in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1967 was funded by the Sugar Research Foundation. The report reviewed the available evidence that linked various nutrients to heart disease and argued that epidemiological and animal studies that linked sugar with heart disease were limited. The review also highlighted studies that linked saturated fat to heart problems. The review was published in the journal without disclosing the sugar industry's funding or role in making the study happen in the first place. The lead authors of the 2016 paper, Kristen Kearns of UCSF, says the evidence the researchers summarized in the review was stronger and more consistent for a sugar effect on coronary heart disease than for a fat effect. No matter how good the evidence was linking sugar to heart disease, there was something wrong with it. But for fat, the evidence was fine. They set up a false dichotomy. It's not the first time researchers have found links between sugar industry connections and nutrition science. The same team of UCSF researchers behind the new study previously used sugar industry documents to reveal how advocacy groups influenced federal cavity prevention recommendations. In an editorial published alongside the new study, Marion Nestle, a professor in the Department of Nutrition and Food Studies at NYU, writes that the Harvard professors who conducted the review knew what the funders wanted and provided those findings. Whether they did this deliberately, unconsciously, or because they genuinely believed saturated fat to be the greater threat is unknown. But science is not supposed to work this way. The documents make this review seem more about public relations than science. The Sugar Association released a statement saying, in part, "We acknowledge that the Sugar Research Foundation should have exercised greater transparency in all of its research activities." However, when the studies in question were published, funding disclosures and transparency standards were not the norm they are today. Beyond this, it is challenging for us to comment on events that allegedly occurred 60 years ago, and on documents we have never seen. In summary, most international journals require complete disclosure of conflicts of interest. A potential conflict of interest could arise from financial relationships, personal relationships, academic competition, strong ideologies or beliefs, etc. Even if a journal does not mention it, it is always advisable that authors include a disclosure of conflicts of interest, or at least write to the journal editor asking if they need to do so. If an author feels that he or she does not have any potential conflict of interest, he or she should give a declaration to that effect. Also, if authors are in doubt about whether a particular situation or transaction can be considered a potential conflict of interest, they should confirm with the editor.